Hello and welcome. My name's Keith Wray. Welcome to Wray in the Bay. Today I've got a story for you that's I think is pretty amazing. It's called the epic quest for the perfect air to fuel ratio. Stoichiometric is the biggest, fanciest word I know. That is until I looked up a word to describe big fancy words. And I found, hold on, let's see here. Better read it. Sesquipedalian. Wow, that's a word that's used to describe long multi-syllabic words. I'd love to use either word in a Scrabble game for a score that might lead me to a victory against Mrs. Wray for once. Too bad you can only play 7 letter tiles at a time. You know, the definition for stoichiometric is really simple. Having the exact proportions for a particular chemical reaction. I think the key word here is exact. So stoichiometric ratio, or Stoke for short, is the exact ratio between air and fuel at which complete combustion takes place. The stoichiometric mixture for a gasoline engine is the perfect ratio of air to fuel that burns all fuel with no excess air. For gasoline fuel, the stoichiometric air-fuel mixture is about 14.7 to 1. So that's 14.7 parts air to 1 part fuel. So stoichiometric's a big fancy word that means the perfect air to fuel ratio. Just exactly how long has the epic quest for the perfect air fuel ratio been underway? The short answer is since 1875. That was when a German engineer named Siegfried Marcus produced a petroleum engine. It used a surface carburetor, which operated by moving air across the top of a vessel containing fuel. It had both a throttle and a mixture control valve that would add more air to a rich mixture and less air to a lean mixture in the first quest for Stoke. So carburetors have been the key component our industry has counted on to attempt to achieve and maintain Stoke for 100 years. Improvements made over the years for metering the fuel continued to improve. I cut my teeth on a Sun Electric scope with HC and CO, that's hydrocarbons and carbon monoxide meters built into the scope. And I would adjust, in those days, I would adjust the carburetors to around 1% CO. Pretty rich, right? Well, that's what Datsun recommended during the 70s. In 1976, after being in development since the 60s, the Bosch Corporation introduced the first automotive lambda sensor, first used by Volvo and Saab that year in Europe, and then they were introduced in the US in 1979. All right, fun facts. Besides being the 11th letter in the Greek alphabet, lambda has several meanings, one of which is scales, and thus balance. So this makes sense considering Stoke is the epic quest for the perfect balance. Let's use that word, of fuel, air, right? I had called them lambda sensors at the Datsun dealership, but soon I started working at a general repair. That changed. In the early 80s, GM came out with computer control carburetors, C3 for short. From then on, at least to me, it was an oxygen sensor, O2 sensor, or O2S for short. So conventional O2S, zirconia, operated in a very narrow air fuel ratio. So there's 2 types of those. The non-heated O2S and the heated O2S. And they both produce 1/10 of a volt to 1 volt. When the air fuel ratio is only slightly leaner than 14.7, the voltage signal to the PCM, the power control module, would drop close to 0. When it's slightly rich, it rises to near or at 1 volt. The PCM does not know how lean or how rich, just that it is. This creates a cycle of lean signal equals rich command, rich signal equals lean command, and so on, so on, and so on. Oxygen sensor testing is watching the voltage signal from the O2S to the PCM on a lab scope. We see that continuous cycle once the sensor is warmed up. On a lab scope, we'll see it go high voltage, low voltage, rich condition, lean condition. Okay. If you look up how to test oxygen sensors, you'll probably see the question about testing oxygen sensors with a multimeter. The meter will show voltage capabilities lean to rich, but it won't do a whole lot for you for testing the reaction time, the speed of the sensor. Also, this type of sensor is considered narrow band. You may have noticed once the sensor's warmed up in the previous paragraph. So 600 degrees is when the sensor will begin to function and make those cycles. Hence, the heated oxygen sensor, or H.O. 2S, okay, is more efficient than relying solely on the exhaust heat. So there are two main types of lean air fuel ratio sensors, LAF sensors. These are wideband and are far more efficient. While wideband sensors are built for pinpoint accuracy. One consists of two zirconia elements in one sensor. The PCM tries to maintain 450 millivolts in both cells. Testing is done by measuring voltage difference between the sensor ground and the sensor signal cell 2. So as you're looking at this, you're going to normally see a 5-wire LAF sensor, okay, and snap the throttle in closed loop to see the reaction time. A second type of LAF sensor uses a ceramic element made of titanium, which varies resistance according to air fuel ratio. This sensor can measure O2 content at a much wider operating range. A typical 4-wire LAF sensor resistance can be seen by snapping the throttle in closed loop, again checking for speed and reaction time. The post-CAT downstream from the catalytic converter, CAT for short, O2 sensors is used to verify the efficiency of the CAT. The oxygen content of exhaust gases leaving the CAT will cause significantly less fluctuation in the post-CAT sensor than the pre-CAT sensor, which is upstream from the CAT. The PCM will compare the pre and post O2 sensors, and it looks at their switch rates to determine if the CAT's functioning properly. A normal operating post-CAT should show a relatively flat output, okay? Whereas a problem will show a functioning cycle. One more thing to cover is fuel trims in relationship to O2S and air fuel ratio sensor. So fuel trim is the adjustment the PCM makes to maintain a balanced air fuel ratio. If the O2 sensor reads rich, the PCM reduces the fuel to lean it out. The fuel trim reading on the scan tool will show a negative number to represent subtracting fuel. So it's plus and minus, right? Adding or subtracting. If the O2S reads lean, the PCM adds fuel to richen the ratio. The fuel trim reading will have a plus sign to represent adding fuel. So in a nutshell, the epic quest for the perfect air to fuel ratio is still underway. It's true, the industry is so much closer year after year, right, to achieving the consistent stoichiometric ratio. If I had to put a name on where we are with this quest, I would say we have achieved maintaining a well-balanced ratio. So that's it. Again, I appreciate you joining me. My name's Keith Wray, Wray in the Bay. Thank you.